Welcome one and all to the Mudai Manga Book Club podcast. Today is April 2nd, 2025. This is episode 10, Intro to Manga, and goodbye. My name is Louie, and I'm happy we actually made it to double-digit episodes. Quite an accomplishment. And I am joined with my co-host.
You haven't seen the last of me. Now goodbye forever.
Tom.
No, we're not going to talk about Futurama today. But anyway, how are you doing, everybody? Good to see you all again. We made it to 10. Woo! Although actually it's really 11 because we had the 0 episode.
Well, yeah, and then we also had the 7.5 episode, so technically this is 12, but we're just going to skip that.
You're right. That was the first double-digit episode. It had 2 digits in it.
Yes, the first official double-digit episode, episode 10. So for anyone who's new, what we talk about is 3 main topics. First one, we're going to just talk about what we've been up to in the last week, what we've been reading, what we've been watching, what we've been playing, things like that. And then our other 2 topics are we're going to do a beginner's guide to manga. This is going to be a part 1, just to kind of give a general overview, and then we'll build upon that as the episodes go on. And then we're also going to do a review of Goodbye Eri.
Yep, sounds good. So, what have you been up to, Louie, this last week?
Okay, so for me, I haven't done a whole lot compared to weeks before, but I have finished Mushoku Tensei Volume 6 of the light novel. So this has now finished their travel across the world from their teleportation to the other side of the world. So they went from the Demon Continent all the way back to where they started. And in that time, 3 years have passed. Not in this one book, but over the course of multiple books.
Yeah.
He's now 3 years older from when he was transported away.
Okay.
And then it's, okay, great. The journey is over. And then you learn, okay, what is the state of the world now? And actually, they find a few more people that they have lost. I don't want to spoil too much. But it's also then, so this is like the end of an arc.
Okay.
I would say it's the end of him traveling across the world. And then it's kind of now setting up for the next part of the story where there's still one more person they're looking for, one more person of his family that's missing. They have a rough idea where she is, but it's still, some people know, some people don't. So it's kind of like, how are we going to tell everyone to go here? And then more time is going to pass just because it takes forever to get anywhere. So, and I think at the end of this one, he has turned 13 in the story. So,
okay.
It's good. I like it. I can't remember when the seasons of the anime fall. I can't remember if this is the end of a season, but some important stuff happens in this book and with some of the companions and the characters. So it's really their journey is over, time to go to the next step of the adventure.
Okay.
So yeah, it's good.
Nice.
So if you ever get a chance, check it out. And then I read another one. It's called Rent a Girlfriend, Volume 1.
I wonder what that's about.
This one, so this premise is that
please explain it to me, because it's a completely imperceptible title. I have no idea.
No idea what it's talking about. So the idea is you pay so much money and girl will pretend to be your girlfriend for a set amount of time. They'll do certain things, they won't do certain things like that, and for a certain amount of money. And it takes place in Tokyo. And the main character is a 20-year-old, I think, in college. And it starts off where his girlfriend just broke up with him.
Okay.
And he's like, I'm super depressed. And then he finds this thing. It's like, you can rent a girlfriend for a couple hours. So he just like, I just don't want to be alone right now. I just want to do this. So he's like, this seems stupid, but I'm desperate. So he rents it, has a great time, but it feels so fake to him. And the story is pretty much like watching a train wreck. It's like he keeps saying stupid things and lying to people, and then the lies he just can't stop himself. He keeps saying things, and then I don't want to go too into detail because it's about him as a college student who's 20.
Yeah. And
the interaction between the girlfriend he rented, his friends, and then his ex-girlfriend, and all the stuff that happens, and it all comes down to he keeps lying and won't stop lying about things and keeps digging himself deeper and deeper into these holes. It's like, you just gotta stop.
Yeah. Okay.
You're just watching this person do horrible choices. Not like someone's gonna die or anything. It's like, why are you saying these things? You're just making it worse. Just shut up. It's like, what are you doing? And then I can't, it's not like the other one, the one with the girl who was the bully who secretly likes him.
Nagatoro.
Where it's kind of like, oh, this seems kind of iffy if it's going to be a good story. It's like, this one is very much, I can't tell if this is just going to be watching someone just fall on their face over and over again because they keep doing stupid things, keep saying stupid things.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if I want to read the next one or not. But if you like watching people just make complete fools of themselves, this is so like, I just can't. Why are you doing this? Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's a neat idea of like, okay, what does rent a girlfriend mean? And how does that play out? And if you're into that kind of college age drama of girlfriends and boyfriends and that kind of thing, it's like, it could be interesting, but to me, it's like, I don't know. I can't decide if it's something that I'll keep reading or not. Just because like, what? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to yourself? It's like, you're just making it worse. Just say the truth and you'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last thing, not a book or movie, it's a game. And this is Master Detectives Archives Rain-Code Plus. I don't know if you've heard of this game.
So it reminds me, just based on the title, it reminds me of Super Famicom Detectives or other, like, it's a Japanese mystery game, right? I'm guessing just because of the way the title is written.
Yes. And I believe, so it's Spike, what's the official name? It's Spike Chunsoft.
Oh, it's by them.
Yes. And I believe it's the same people who did Danganronpa.
Yes. Spike Chunsoft. Spike made Danganronpa. I don't remember if their original name was Chunsoft, but the other company made the Zero Escape series, and then they combined into one company and became Spike Chunsoft.
Yes.
So
I believe this is supposed to be the successor of Danganronpa.
Okay.
So what it is it's a world where there are mysteries that have to be solved by master detectives, obviously. And what they do is they go around solving these unknown issues, like someone got murdered or something's disappeared and things like that. Because if they don't solve them, the mystery just gets deeper and deeper and darker, and eventually it starts creating more mysteries and things just kind of spiral out of control. So you have these master detectives to go in, it's like, okay, this is what happened, thus no one has to think about this anymore. We've solved the mystery and moved on. Except in this one, master detectives are sent to a city that is controlled by a mega corporation. And this city doesn't want master detectives in. And I'm not far enough in it to know why.
Okay.
But it gets dark fast. And it plays a little different from Danganronpa. It's full 3D.
Okay.
You go around doing detective things because you are a master detective. Technically, you think you're a master detective because your main character... So I've only done the first case because it took quite a few hours to do the first one. Mm-hmm. Just because it's like it's tutorial after tutorial. It's like, this is how it works and it's different and things like that. Mm-hmm. So as you're going through, it's like, okay, your character has amnesia and is haunted by a Shinigami.
Okay.
And the reason why is explained, and I won't spoil it, but you are then put on a train to go to this city there's something bad going there, but no one will be allowed in who's a master detective. They're like, we don't want any of them in. We are actively preventing them to come in. And you're on this train. You don't know how you got there. And the mystery is, I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, just leave it there.
Yeah. There's a mystery as soon as you get on the train. And it's like, okay, you have all these crazy characters. Mm-hmm. They have these powers. Like, everyone is supposed to be like, you're good at something.
Yeah.
And then they're all like the Danganronpa. They're all weird people. Like young, old, boy, girl, all those kind of things. Mm. And it's like, okay, this got weird fast. And then, unlike Trials from Danganronpa, this one, you go into a fantasy dungeon.
Okay.
And figure out the mystery in the dungeon. Like, the Shinigami pulls you out, sticks you in a dungeon. Like, pulls you out of reality, sticks you in a dungeon. And in the dungeon, you've already done all the investigation. You go into the dungeon to piece it all together. because you're seeing things out of order sometimes in the real world. It's like, I went into this room, there was something there, but if you think about it in the dungeon, it's like, oh, well, that should have happened before I got there, and then this should have happened after I left, and things like that. And it's like almost a wordplay, but it also does the same thing where Danganronpa, where you have to align clues with key phrases.
Okay.
So a phrase will come in, it's like, this person was always dead, and then you say, they were never dead, kind of thing.
Sure.
So it's like, okay, it's cool. But
Nice.
It's so over the top. It's like, we are going to just dump the most ridiculous stylistic things. The Shinigami is through the roof crazy.
Okay.
It's like, this is, if you could think of something and just make it more anime, take Danganronpa and just make it more anime.
Okay.
We can make
Somehow.
this as weird as we want, because the training wheels are off. We're just doing whatever we feel like, and it's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. And the mystery's cool. The story is interesting. I still haven't made it to the second mystery yet, but it looks like it'll be a fun ride.
Cool.
Yeah. And it plays great in the Steam Deck, so that's good.
Yay.
So what have you been up to?
So I may not have explained it right, but I didn't end up meeting my goal of reading all of How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom 1 through 18 in time to read the new one, which is now out. And I was definitely able to read at the time when it was released. Yep. Yeah, no, that didn't happen.
So is 18 the one that came out, or 19?
Book 19 just released.
Okay.
And I've been reading this. I don't know if I would say when it started coming out. I kind of want to check, though, but I've been reading this since at least 2018, 2019 in English. It came out in the US, I think, in 2017. It's one of the first novels brought over by J Novel Club when they were starting out. And so I have been working my way through that. I got through 1 through 7 last week, along with a couple other things this week. That's pretty much all I've read.
Okay.
Volumes 8 to 17. I've started 18, but I haven't finished it yet, and then I'm going to finally get to read 19. I am incredibly excited for it. I'm not going to give spoilers, but since I have happened to read the first 18 books of it, I can just tell you random plot points of books completely out of order and just be like, yes, this is what happens in this series. There's a book. So I think I didn't talk about it that much last time, I'm going to talk about it again this time. It is a pretty standard isekai at first, where Japanese person, college age, gets transported to another world, but instead of getting super cheap powers, his only real power is languages, because of course, and the ability to control dolls, but that's not exactly right. It's not very powerful. But instead of becoming a hero, he becomes the king of the country that is facing a massive food crisis, refugees, paying war subsidies to the bigger kingdom that's defending against the Demon Lord's domain, which is tearing the continent apart. And their neighbors are trying to take back territory that their kingdoms took from them 50 years ago. And the three powers that control the military in the country are kind of not really sure what to do and are maybe going to betray him. And all the nobles don't like him. And yeah, the kingdom's doing bad. So he becomes the king.
Okay.
The entire story, the author talks about how when he was writing it as a web novel, he changed the title after book 4 from Rebuilt to, I think, Renewed, because the first 4 books is rebuilding it from broken to a fully functioning kingdom, and actually one of the biggest kingdoms on the continent.
Okay.
Because it's very large. I think if you look at a map, it's like a sixth of the whole landmass. Half of it got taken by the Demon Lord and all the monsters coming from up north. And of the bottom half, they have like 1/4, but like they were having all these huge issues, and the first 4 books is settling all of that. And then the story focuses a lot on the administration side of things. There are battles. There's a war against a neighboring kingdom, a civil war, a war against a kaiju, two wars against invading monster swarms, not directly in the kingdom, but the kingdom goes to support two different wars. There's monster extermination war.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 6 or 7 wars, but it's still mostly about him like figuring out policies to improve education and monetary resources, and he's very roundabout. The story pulls a lot from actual history. To give an example, because of the demon lord appearing and the demons and monsters coming from the north, the actual biggest kingdom, the Grand Chaos Empire, creates this thing called the Mankind Declaration, where all nations that sign onto it will abide by these 3 rules of there will be no borders changed by military force, all people will have the right to self-determination, and people who are away from the front lines of the Demon Lord's domain will provide assistance to those who are on the border to help protect everyone.
Okay.
In like the 3rd books, the hero Soma reveals like, yeah, there's something horribly wrong with this and it's going to all break down. And it's not until like 3 books later where it's like, oh yeah, this is why, because here's the flaw in it. And there's all these like things that are based on world history that he's redone into this fantasy world.
Interesting.
And used them as events because the hero Soma is a history major. He obviously knows about all of these.
Okay.
It's not very... It has some plot twists. It has some very good plot twists. It has some sort of okay ones. It has some okay romances. They're not great, but they're not awful. The characters are all really interesting. It's still a pretty traditional isekai. He does marry a lot of people, but also one of the things... And I feel like this is less true now than when I started reading it. Especially less true now than when you and I were younger and like first got in. It very much feels like a story where things are always moving forward. It's not just he has a bunch of people who really like him. It's like, no, he has a bunch of people who he likes. And then he gets engaged to them. And then they get married. And then they have kids. The relationships and the characters and the events are always moving forward. And stuff changes.
Nice.
Not just from like people dying, which it's a pretty lighthearted series. So while sometimes people will die, it's generally uncommon.
Okay. Yep.
Even though there are all these huge battles, they tend to be more administrative and policy to solve the problem rather than just use the giant sword of light to destroy things.
Okay. So is the story over?
The story has been finished in Japanese.
Okay.
Book 19, possibly book 20, I haven't read it yet, but book 19 is the final war. There's in like book 8, so the Demon Lord's domain exists since like book 1. Someone else comes in book 8 that you're not sure how they're going to affect it. And by like book 13, you know, like, okay, this is where the world is going. Book 19 is the final war to decide all of that.
Okay.
It may continue into book 20. I don't know. Or the war may end in book 19 because I haven't read it yet.
And the new one is?
The new one is 19. 18 was the build up to this war and the start of it. 19 is the war. And 20 will either be the end of the war or the post-war...
kind of wrap everything up.
Yeah.
But this is not going to be any more. 20 is it?
As far as I know, both looking at the series in Japan, no, there aren't any more. There may be one other book that exists called Chronicles. I'm guessing it's short stories. I don't know for sure.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I believe at the end of 18, I haven't gotten back to it yet, but the author in his little notes at the end says that he's expecting it to end at book 20.
Okay.
From the way he's described what things are going on, that makes sense. Whatever happens in book 19 and book 20, it's like there's more in this world where stuff can still happen. But what Soma is trying to accomplish and what he's trying to do, yeah, it's basically this war and then what happens after, and then that's basically it.
Okay.
It's a fantastic series. Been around for quite a while. And we're almost at the end. So exciting.
Nice.
And having reread this series that I've been reading for several years and go back through it and be like, it's still not perfect, but it's still really fun.
Okay, well, that's important.
It's good to see that and be like, I wasn't just a dumb idiot 7 years ago when I started reading this. Or it wasn't just, because I didn't know what was happening. It was entertaining. Like, no, I know everything that's going to happen up to this point, but it's still a lot of fun.
Nice.
Definitely a story that I recommend. Is probably one of my favorites of all time.
Very cool. I'll have to check it out. I haven't read it yet, so
yeah.
I will add it to the list.
There is a manga of it. I have some minor issues with it, but it is very good. I've talked about it before because I recently read all of that too, and that's still ongoing. And I believe there's an anime, but I have no idea, and I know they have not gotten anywhere near to the end of the books. They might have just done the first 4, which would actually make a pretty good anime.
Yeah, because it looks from the manga they've done up to 11 books.
Which in the novels, I believe, is book 5.
Yeah, Soma travels to Lagoon City.
That's not specific enough. Although if I'm thinking... Yeah, I believe that's book 5.
Which kind of makes sense. Because typically it's 2-ish for a light novel.
To make it quick, the thing I think the manga doesn't do as well as the book is the book has so many characters who show up so early but keep coming back, whereas the manga doesn't introduce all of them as early. I can think of several small characters who aren't super important in the first couple of books, but they're there. And then in books 4 and 5, they actually become really important. They suddenly go from just like, there's a side character who is there in the background to, this is incredibly important to what's going on with this character's life. A lot of it is not that heavy and not that important, but it's sort of just a fun read. So I've always found it really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good.
That's been my week.
Still quite a few light novels in a week.
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so at all. No. Yes, you would, but you're wrong.
Fine. Just this once.
Okay, you agreed. There we go.
I'll give you this once.
The other thing I will say, which is actually a weird thing for me to say, I actually like the side stories in this. Like the random, like one-off chapters. There's a couple that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I really want to read this.
Yep.
Most books, when it's like, here's the random extra side story, I'm like, I don't care.
Back to the main.
These ones, I read pretty much all of them.
Nice.
So, it's Dojamaru, who's the author, does a good job.
So for our second topic today, we're going to do a beginner's guide to manga. This is going to be a part 1. This is going to be a very high level overview of some terms, what it is. We throw out names and terms all the time and realize that there's a lot of stuff that we say that is just things we know, but that doesn't mean a new reader or someone who's been reading for a while knows what they are. So we wanted to do a quick guide on just what manga is. So this will be a part 1. We'll do a part 2 eventually with more information, kind of other things we've learned over the years of reading and just looking stuff up. First, what is a manga?
Manga is basically, while there's a lot of connotations in what it is and the styles of it, manga is basically Japanese comic books. That should be your first thought about it, of what is manga? Manga is Japanese comics. There's a lot of differences and a lot of tropes and a lot of design features to it that are different from what people in America and people in Europe think of as comic books. But your first thought should be, it's comic books, but in Japan.
And a peek behind the curtain is, so the name of our podcast is Mudai Manga. So it's Mudai Comics. And what Mudai stands for is Untitled. So our rough translation of our podcast is the Untitled Comic Book Club Podcast. So another thing that you might hear, comic is synonymous in English. Everyone can kind of picture what a comic book is. But as we say, Manga in Japanese is comic, rough idea. So you also hear the term manhwa, which is comic in Korean, which is...
So manhwa is the Korean equivalent.
Yes.
They're similar, but they're not the same. Obviously, they have their own tropes, their own styles, and things like that. They're closer to manga than they are to American-style comic books, but they're still their own unique thing. The name just happens to also be very similar. I think because they're coming from the Chinese pronunciation.
I think so.
Japanese, Korean, Chinese, there's a lot of crossovers with that language in the same way that English, German, and French have a lot of crossovers, and Spanish have a lot of crossovers where things are named based on another language's words.
Exactly. Another thing that we've thrown around all the time is light novel.
Mm-hmm.
So light novel, for the most part, is a book. Just words on a page.
Yes.
It becomes slightly different when you think of a light novel in the Japanese form because it's still words in a book, but there are also illustrations. There's usually an artist and character designer sometimes, but it's it's not really short stories for the most part. They're full stories, but it's kind of its own little subculture of written word books.
Yeah.
Thus the light novel.
And that is not just an English translation. In Japanese, it is called a daito noberu, or light novel. It's not easy to explain what it is because it's not specifically any one thing. It has a strong tendency to be a very pulpy, lightweight novel, generally of a shorter length, generally with pictures included, either in like a front art section or during the stories, generally of a manga or anime type story, but all those are generalies.
Yes. Just like with manga, you can have all kinds of different genres and things like that. And a lot of times you will see that light novels then get brought over into manga, which then can also be brought into anime. So you'll see that while there are manga that stand alone, that they were just created as manga, a lot of them could be created from a light novel. So for example, Overlord is a light novel first, then a manga. Or How Realist Hero that we were just talking about. That was a light novel. There's a manga. That happens quite often.
Yep. It's not impossible for it to go the other way, for it to start as an anime or a manga and then become a light novel. But those are much rarer.
Yeah.
I cannot think of any examples off the top of my head, but it's not necessarily impossible. It's just they tend to come from light novels to become manga and then maybe become an anime.
A lot of times I've seen it where it goes manga to light novel is there are unique stories in themselves. They're kind of like offshoots.
That's true.
Because I know for Chainsaw Man, there's actually a light novel about side stories.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
They usually don't try to retell the manga as a pure light novel. I've never seen one like that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's rare if it does.
Yeah.
Usually you will find a light novel then gets almost a full retelling as a manga.
Yeah. For our next section, we're going to cover, the best way to put it is your sort of demographic terms. I don't mind reading them off because I speak Japanese. And then you can give us a quick explanation of them. But you start off with kodomo.
So kodomo is, think of it as stories catered towards children, like Doraemon. It's stories for children, for much younger children, so...
early elementary school.
I can't remember if Pokemon falls into that, like younger Pokemon kind of stories that they have.
Pokemon's on the edge between them. When I think of Kodomo stories, and I don't hear that term too often, to me it reminds me of something that would be on Nick Jr., if you're an American viewer. Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, the shows that are basically children entertainment shows.
Yep.
So you're looking kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, maybe preschool age.
Like Hello Kitty.
Yeah, Hello Kitty.
That kind of age group. There's full magazines for them. There's stories specifically designed for that age bracket. And that's where Kodomo comes from.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever read one, because I was well past that by the time I got into this.
I did not know that they had actual Kodomo magazines.
I think there's like 2.
That makes sense that there might be 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's probably not the most popular thing.
No, but these stories do exist.
Yeah.
And there is an age bracket for young children.
Yep. The next one you probably have heard, but it is the classic shonen.
We've said this term quite often. So this is specifically for boys, not teen level. So younger side of the teen boy dynamic. So 10s, 12s, that range.
Yeah.
But it's very much on the boy side of the spectrum of the kinds of stories they tell. So there's more like heroes, adventures, things like that.
Yep.
But don't get into deep level topics.
Now, that doesn't mean that this is still made for children. A lot of things that are considered shonen still have sex, violence, horrible things happening. Jujutsu Kaisen, Naruto, Bleach, those are all shonen. Those are all like...
Yes.
I feel like it's late elementary to like middle school is like...
Roughly, yeah.
Has to be appropriate for them, although plenty of people read it and it tends to be one of the more popular ones around.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I think, the terms have kind of gotten a little mixed as the years have gone on. They're not as rigid, I think, as they used to be. By the topics that they talk about and what they show and things like that. There's still things that you definitely don't show in shonen that you show in others, and things that you show in others that you don't show in shonen.
Yep.
But it's less of a rigid, you can only be these 2 age groups, that's it.
Yeah.
It's much more of a feel. It's like, this is more shonen-y kind of thing.
I think another part of that is there's this famous magazine called Shonen Jump, is so big and trying to cater to more people, has a wider variety of things than you would necessarily think of for shonen. Just as if you thought of it as like a demographic term.
Yeah.
You have that.
Yep.
And then after that we have seinen.
This is still for the male side, but now you're getting late teens adult stories. Not like adult stories, like X-rated kind of stories, but much either more complicated themes or much darker themes. So this is your Berserk. This is your...
Berserk, obviously, extremely graphic violence, but you also have ones that are much deeper philosophical. Mushishi is a very famous one that is seinen, but also ones that are just going to be something that an adult would be more interested, like Drops of God, the manga about drinking wine.
Yep.
Where it's all about wine tasting. I think the thing to understand about seinen is it's not just, it's shonen action, but they don't have the restrictions of it has to be middle school appropriate. It's for people who are older, and as far as I know, and I'm not the greatest expert on the genres, this will cover anything from people who are in their late teens, 20s, but also their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and the sort of comics that would appeal to them. Generally male, but you're going to see things like manga about businessmen and like their lives and stories. That's just as much seinen as Berserk. This is definitely more the demographic term and what's the appropriate age level, rather than shonen gives you that sense of like, it's going to be a battle series or something like that, because it's the tendency of what it's had. Seinen is so much more varied.
Yep. It can cover a much wider range of people, so you have a much larger range of topics that people would be interested in.
Yep.
Another one is Goblin Slayer or Space Brothers.
Golgo 13.
Golgo 13. That category of seinen gets so much larger than the other categories, just because you now can cover 16 and older.
Yep.
You're good to go. So you'll get some of everything if you go there, but it will become much more mature. Or it can be.
After that, we have shoujo.
Yeah, so this is the girl version of shonen. So you have a girl demographic. I actually can't think of any that I've actually read that are shoujo.
Sailor Moon?
Perfect, yes. Sailor Moon. Definitely on the shoujo side of that one.
Fruits Basket.
Is that shoujo or the one we haven't talked about yet?
The next one? I'm not sure. I don't know if you can tell, but we're 2 guys. So it's not that either of us dislike it, but it hasn't been something we've got a ton of following on. And in the US too, a lot more of it is shonen, seinen is what's translated and brought over because they tend to be more popular.
Yes, Fruits Basket is a shoujo.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like because shoujo sounds more like little kids, but no, this is like early teen girls. Yeah. Cardcaptor Sakura.
Yep, that's another one. It's one of those, when we started, when we were actually much younger, this was a very much, Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, and not much else. So you had the shonen Dragon Ball, you had the shoujo Sailor Moon, and just Dragon Ball is more popular, so more Dragon Ball kind of shows were brought over. Mm-hmm. And that's Shonen Jump. That's where Dragon Ball came from.
Yep.
Thus, a huge flood of shonen stories.
Yeah.
And the other demographics are slowly catching up just because they've always been around in Japan, and now they're slowly becoming more and more popular as they come over to the US.
They're not catching up in Japan. They've always been there.
Yes,
but
exactly.
It's English-speaking audiences who aren't living in Japan and aren't keeping close eye on it. Those are becoming more available. And they are certainly out there. There's certainly been a lot, even though we can't name any off the top of our heads, simply because we haven't
read enough.
Been following them closely, or the ones that we've read don't always jump right out at you and go, oh, that's a shoujo one. Like, oh, is Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles, is that shoujo or not? Because it's like, it's by Clamp, but they're not always that demographic. They'll do other things, and where does that land? Which is another massively popular series, but where does it exactly land? Not being Japanese and not seeing them in the magazine, it can be harder to just tell unless you've looked it up where the consensus is for what demographic it is.
Even as we're saying these demographics, there's blurred lines through all of this stuff. It's just, these terms get thrown out a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have a rough idea of like, what are they even talking about when they say seinen? Like, or shoujo. It's like, who is this for? And just because it's for boys, girls, things like that, doesn't mean they're not great stories.
Yep.
It's just, this is the bucket they happen to fall into because someone thought that would make more sense for those readers.
Yep. And just because you don't fit in the demographic it's targeting, doesn't mean you won't enjoy it.
Right. Exactly.
Fruits Basket is really good. Mm-hmm. Cardcaptor Sakura is really good. I like reading them. But it's not necessarily what I would be expected to like, given who I am, is probably the best way to think about it.
Yep.
The last one that you'll hear commonly is josei. Bet you can guess where this one lands, but it is.
So this is for adult women, so the opposite is seinen. This is, I can't think of one that I've read.
I have a couple. Nana. I don't know if it quite hit josei. Might not be able to. It's the story of two women with the same name, both called Nana. It's a great anime as well. There was one other I saw, and I can't remember what it was.
Similar to shonen, josei, and shoujo, shonen has a lot of action, adventure kind of stories. Shoujo, josei, more of on the romance side of stories, but even that's kind of iffy. Take these with a grain of salt. These are terms that people use. These are things that come up, but it's, if you like the story, you like the story, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
The demographic is just how they sell these things, but anyone can read these. It's like, this is a cool story. I don't care who it's supposed to be for. Because I really like Fruits Basket. That's not aimed at me. Technically, neither is One Piece or Bleach. I am supposedly well past that. I should be reading much older, much more serious stories, but I don't feel like it. These demographics are terms that people use, and we just want to make sure that everyone understands what they mean.
You'll see them. You might see people talk about them. And you'll see tendencies of genre. Shonen tends to be actiony. Seinen tends to be darker. Shoujo tends to be more of like a lot of magical girl series end up in shoujo because that's who they expect to be reading it and who to be interested in. Josei tends to be a lot more romance. But again, nothing exactly fits into any one category. It's just who they expect their readers to be.
Because there's been a bunch of romance shonen manga.
Yep.
So they're terms that come out. Important to know, but also don't be stuck on these labels. If it's a cool story, go for it. Doesn't matter what demographic it is.
Yep. Beyond that, we also have... Why don't you take this? You've compiled some information on how manga is put out to people.
Yeah. So if you're from the US, you know that comic books typically come out once a month, and they come out in a single booklet. Okay, here's your number 275 of X-Men for the month of July of 2025. In Japan, it's a bit different. It's typically combined in omnibus volumes, so you'll get one volume of Shonen Jump, which is a shonen magazine, and it will have a number of stories from all different authors compiled in a single volume. It gets released different ways. Sometimes it's weekly, like Shonen Jump is a weekly book that comes out that you'll find in convenience stores or libraries or and bookshops and all over the place. But then you'll have ones that come out maybe bi-monthly, so 2 volumes a month, or monthly, so, or even quarterly, or even sometimes they just come out when they feel like it.
Yep.
But they're always collections of stories typically, and you'll get some number every time depending on who creates it. All these different companies release it. You'll see them all over the place if you go to Japan.
Yes. And these are not small.
No.
Shonen Jump is, I think, like 300 or 400 pages every week.
I don't know if people still know what phone books are, but it's the size of a phone book.
Yeah. It's also, that's not of any one story. That's a 300 or 400 page book of, for Shonen Jump's case, usually dozens of stories. Mm-hmm. Each series just doing one single chapter.
Yep. They'll have usually a colored cover, maybe a couple colored pages, and then a chapter of each volume, typically maybe a double chapter depending if there's something special going on. It's also has a lot of ads in it.
Yep. It's a weekly magazine.
It's a magazine. It's at least an inch thick. And
it can be more than that. Yeah.
And also, if you ever pick one up, you notice that the quality of the paper is not the best.
It's real bad.
And you'll notice that the printing is not the best. And that's because they make these really fast.
And they're cheap.
Oh, yeah. Well. These are dirt cheap.
Yeah, they're like 400 or 500 yen when I remember, but that was a long time ago. I don't know if they're more now. But it's like,
I have one. Let me double check.
Yeah, they're usually less than $10. It might be less than like $5. They're meant to be very inexpensive to be read and then thrown away. These are not how you collect your book. And if you wanted to read any sort of long-running series and you got them, you would not have room on your bookshelf very quickly because they just take up, they're big.
So I have one here. This is this is number 42 from 2023. Can you guess how much it was?
490 yen.
No, it was 290 yen.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's about, right now, 290 yen as of when we're recording this, weirdly backdated by exactly 1 week for no reason, is $1.93.
Yeah, and it's over 400 pages.
Yeah, it's a massive phone book. If I remember correctly, the scale of like the book around, the pages are bigger than they'll be in any book that you get.
Yes.
They will be shrunk down. When they're collected into a book, they will be physically smaller.
Yeah. The only time I think it isn't is they've started to do on some really popular series much larger omnibuses.
No, that is a thing. So they'll do the series, it'll be in the magazine, then they'll do the tankobons, which are like the published books, and then if the series is really popular, they'll do another book printing where it's a bigger format.
Okay.
They may be doing an even bigger one for ones that are really popular or have good art, but I don't know if there is a third level to it. But yes, there is a published in a magazine. It's popular enough. It'll be put out into a book. That's a very standard size in Japan. Yep. And then if it's really popular, they'll republish it again in a slightly larger format.
Yes. But here in the US, the tankobon is actually slightly smaller. So if you ever see a Japanese version versus an English version, they're actually on the smaller side. And I think those larger volumes that you're talking about, I've only ever seen those come out in special editions. Dark Horse does their leather-bound ones. I think I've seen Attack on Titan, giant Titan-sized versions. But for the most part, the US only has the one size with some variation.
I'm just going to sum it up like this. I know that I don't know how bunkoban and tankobans work in Japan, and I don't want to be wrong. So I'm just going to tell you, we don't know. We haven't sat down and done the research to get the exact dimensions on it.
Yeah.
You certainly can if you want to, and there's... The Japanese publishing industry is fascinating, but we're not going to talk about it, and we're not going to claim that we know exactly what it is. This is just an overview. Please don't get mad at us.
But like the typical books that you see in bookstores and things like that in the US, Tankoban is similar idea. It's a collection of chapters in a single book that you can then purchase later once they've compiled, depending on how many chapters are in a volume. One thing to note is depending on how often it's published. So if something's published weekly, the chapters are usually shorter versus a monthly one. So a tankobon or a collection that you see in the US, if it's a weekly, like One Piece, will have 10, 12 chapters in a book. Whereas something that comes out monthly, like Berserk, would have maybe 5, depending on how long a chapter is.
Yep.
So that's one thing to note, is that if it's a weekly, typically there's more chapters, just because they can only do so many in a week. It depends on the story and who's writing it, and is it
and
new?
the specific chapters.
Yeah.
And all that. You'll generally see the collection books in like 170 to like 250 pages long, in that range. And they usually don't deviate it from that too much. So if you have a weekly that's shorter, there'll be more chapters in it. Whereas if you have a monthly or a quarterly or something, you'll have fewer chapters in it, but it will still be the same physical size.
Yeah.
And it's those published books after the magazine. If you're in the US, when you go and buy Bleach number 7, the 7th volume of it, like that's those books of those collections. That's basically the same thing.
Yep. And there's usually a delay between it comes out in Japan and comes out in English, obviously. One thing I don't know if we've defined, but we've said it a bunch. I know I've said it, is omnibus. So think of this as 2 or 3 books stuck together into one book. That's the idea. Some stories come like that. Some have, just due to the cost of publishing and re-releasing, are shifted to that. So, for example, Tsubasa, Reservoir Chronicles, were originally single books. Now I think you can only get them in omnibuses.
I have not looked into this closely in Japan itself. I don't feel like this is something that they do as often. This is more of a American, European thing, the omnibus style. They don't tend to do those larger books width-wise, but I don't know for sure. But you will see that a lot in the US and in other English-speaking countries, other non-Japanese countries, the sort of omnibus style. And it's just, instead of buying books 1, 2, and 3, they just ripped the cover off book 2 and 3 and just made one wrap around all 3 of them and just sewed them together. That's basically an omnibus. That's
Pretty
just
much
a bigger collection.
As we were talking about the tankobons earlier, I have one here for Dragon Ball. Can you guess how much that was? So this is just volume 1.
Volume 1.
I picked it up 2 years ago.
Brand new at a bookstore?
Yep, brand new.
690 yen.
440.
Okay. That is fairly cheap.
Yes.
And it's going to be cheaper than what most actually are, both because it's A, so incredibly popular, and B, really old. So they've gotten away with lots of reprintings and things like that. So they haven't had to make a new book. So the price is probably a little bit lower. You will find for a book anywhere from like $4.90, which you will still find today. Not just for Dragon Ball, but for other things too, up to about 1,000 yen, which is about $10. So anywhere from $5 to $10 for 250 pages of comics.
Yep.
And you will find things that are more expensive than that. Japanese publishing tends to be on the less expensive side than it is in the US.
Yep.
But part of that's also because books are very set in their sizes. Everything sort of fits together. They're sort of, the paper and everything is always in this very strict format.
Yes.
And lots of people buy them.
I'm looking at the books on my wall, and the English ones, the sizes are roughly the same, but there is some definite variation between who is publishing and the size it relates to.
And that's definitely a thing that can happen.
Yeah.
They'll adjust it and change it how they want to English, you'll generally see them be roughly in the same space. But if you go to a lot of Japanese bookstores and look at all the books in the shelves, not everything will be exactly the same size, but you'll see like hundreds of books from tons of different series, all exactly the same size, shape, and thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's ever perfectly exact, but much closer than you would find in the US.
Yeah. So, as we were talking about earlier, there's also a number of different publishers in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They typically publish a certain demographic, but not always. So, for example, a company that does shonen may do shonen, but then they will just have that in a single magazine and then do seinen in a separate magazine. So we're not cross-contaminating. So you don't have an adult story next to someone who's supposed to, it's like for an 11-year-old.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that any of the larger publishers focus on a specific demographic. They'll generally do everything, but they will make individual magazines that are focused on those demographics. That's usually where you see them come up. The publisher of this magazine will have a shonen magazine. They'll have a seinen magazine. They'll have a josei magazine. They'll have a shoujo magazine. They might have 3 seinen magazines. One of my favorite publishers had, at least at one point, 3 different seinen magazines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were all different, but large publishers generally will have multiple different magazines. Where it's published will decide who the publisher is, and some of them are pretty famous.
Yeah, and then some of them will do, like, as you were saying, multiple, say, shonen magazines, but they will also do one where it releases on different schedules as well. So you'll have one that does come out weekly, but then you'll have one that comes out monthly. Same demographic, but the length that you're allowed to do in the story for a weekly versus a monthly lets you create different kinds of stories. Because I know the people who make Shonen Jump also do a monthly one that the stories are just different. Same demographic, but you can get much more complex stories sometimes by just having more pages to work with and more time to work on the story. So that happens a lot. For example, there's a number of publishers in Japan. Some of the major ones are Shueisha. They are the publisher of Shonen Jump. So that's, if not the biggest, one of the biggest ones. They do One Piece. They did Bleach. They did Naruto. They do One Punch Man. Those kind of things. When someone thinks manga, it's typically Shonen Jump because One Piece is so popular now.
Yeah.
There's Kodansha. They are Fairy Tail or a number of other ones. So it's another publisher, same kind of demographic, different creator. There's also, you're going to have to pronounce this one.
Shogakukan.
Yep.
Who did Detective Conan, or are doing Detective Conan.
Yep.
Publishing it at least. Hakusensha, who did Fruits Basket. This one's tough. Square Inks?
Yeah.
Square Enix.
Yeah.
The video game company. Yeah, they have their own manga magazine as well.
They did Full Metal Alchemist, I believe.
Soul Eater.
They've done Can You Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?
They've done a lot of big series.
They've done a lot.
That have nothing to do with their games.
All of these companies have.
Yes. And then, as you have listed here, there's tons of other smaller companies. You'll hear the terms Dojin or Dojinshi, which is basically like self-published, but not distributed. And this is where you get into things like Comiket and these other big events in Japan where people will just get together, and there's obviously a bunch of stuff for all the big published magazines, but all these individual people will just be there like selling their own comic books.
Some can be fan-made, some can be just, I created this story, I just did on my free time, or I wanted to shop this around, but nobody wanted it. Dojinshi is the book, and then Dojin is the idea of self-publishing. And then when you flip to the US side, some crossover, some do not, kind of like most publishing. So the big ones you hear in the US for manga is Dark Horse. They do manga, but they also do Western comics and comics from all around the world. They are a really big one.
Yep.
Viz Media does...
Viz is the big one.
Viz is the big one for manga, just in general in the US.
Yeah.
I don't know if they get all of Shonen Jump, but they get most of them.
I don't know if they get all of Shonen Jump for all time, but I believe nowadays everything Shonen Jump comes out through Viz.
It's one of those, they aren't Shonen Jump, so they're not part of Shueisha. They are their own company, so they can pick and choose which ones they want.
Yeah.
Because I've seen ones that I know were shonen, but Viz didn't pick them up because they didn't fit into their vibe.
I think they have done more to cover a lot of the Shonen Jump stuff, and they'll do more of it now. But I think early on, when they were starting out, they didn't do all of the series because they weren't that big at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the other ones that were popular that they hadn't picked up would be picked up by other companies. I think nowadays they tend to be doing most of them.
I think so.
But I couldn't tell you for sure. It is one of the bigger American ones.
And then there's Seven Seas Entertainment. They pick up a lot. I know they have the Ayakashi Triangle. They do more. It's hard to say. So they also have the Ancient Magus Bride.
Yep.
They pick up a lot. There's a lot of Seven Seas Entertainment if you go look at their site. Mm-hmm. There's also Yen Press. They've done a lot. Goblin Slayer is Yen Press.
Yeah, I feel like Dark Horse is big because they've picked up some really important series and they've done so much with comics in the US that they've always been around. Viz does the most, and then Seven Seas and Yen Press do a lot, and they tend to be a little bit more of the weird / the things that maybe would never have made it as comics in the US that are more Japanese or more Japanese weirdness that wouldn't have gotten published so easily in America.
Yeah, I think so.
That's sort of how I think of them. But again, these are publishing companies. They'll publish the thing that they think is going to be popular, and they're not specifically doing any one thing. But these are the big companies that you'll do it. So if you're interested to see what's coming out new, these are the ones to look out for.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You have Kodansha here.
Yes. So Kodansha also has an arm in the US, and they have published, for example, Attack on Titan is Kodansha. Seven Deadly Sins is Kodansha. Fire Force is Kodansha. But Soul Eater is Yen Press. So once they come over to the US, sometimes it will go to whatever publisher wants it. Mm-hmm. It's really about what their brand focuses on. So for example, you think Dark Horse, you think of the Berserk is what they publish. But then they also do the Shinji Ikari project, which is nothing like Berserk.
It sure would be nice if they remembered that they were the ones who have Eden Zero. I'm never going to let that go. Not Eden Zero.
Eden Zero.
Eden, It's an Endless World.
Yeah.
I'm never going to let that go. I'm still so mad that they haven't finished it, because there was even an afterword they specifically put in that they added saying they were going to finish the series. They didn't. Last one you have here is J Novel Club. This is one that I've read a lot because I've been reading light novels for a lot longer. They're probably the newest of the ones that we've mentioned here.
I think so.
They only started in 2017, with a bunch of things, and they mostly focus on light novels. They do have some manga, but they do a lot of translating the light novels and things into English as opposed to the manga themselves. Although they do some, and they've branched out into other things.
Yeah. I think of the companies we have just mentioned, J Novel is predominantly light novels. The other ones may have some, but that's not what they're going for.
It does have some manga too, and I believe Seven Seas and Yen Press have also expanded and are doing a lot more light novels. Mm-hmm. Kodansha in the US might be as well. Viz and Dark Horse really don't seem like they're doing very much at all. They'll do a few.
Right.
They feel like, this is cool, or this is something we want to bring over, but they don't focus on it. They don't have a big catalog for light novels.
Yeah.
J Novel, Yen Press, and Seven Seas is probably your big three in America for light novels, with Kodansha US maybe being up there. I just don't know that one as a publisher as well. Mm-hmm. But J Novel's massive. I think they have something like 200 or 300 series.
Yeah, there's so many.
They've done a lot.
So many stories out there. I don't know if we'll ever be able to cover them all. And there's tons coming out constantly.
Yep.
And one other thing that we didn't mention is that we talked about manga going to light novels, going to anime. There's also the whole digital side of stories that come even before light novels, where people just create stories online that then get turned into light novels or get turned into manga.
Yep. The concept in Japan of web novels, where it's simply someone posting it. There's a couple of famous Japanese sites. Shosetsuka ni Naro is probably the biggest, but some other stories have started on Pixiv, which is basically a Japanese art website, and a couple other places where someone will just start writing a novel and just be putting it out there. Lots of people read it, it gets popular, and a publisher will just go to them and say, hey, we want to publish this as an actual book. Okay, and that's where it comes from. A number of the famous stories we've talked about on the light novel side recently, how a realist hero rebuilt a kingdom, Overlord, Shangri-La Frontier, didn't end up becoming a light novel, but it started as a web novel and then just jumped immediately to a manga.
And now the season 2 is ending of the anime.
Yeah.
There's stories everywhere.
Yeah.
And really good ones will get picked up. They will become publishers, and now we get to enjoy them in the US, which years ago we did not.
Yeah.
And then at least nowadays they finish publishing them typically. Like series that get canceled in Japan won't continue in the US obviously, but there were times a number of years ago where series just they didn't sell well in the US, so they just stopped doing it.
I think that's also helped by the digital nature.
Yes.
It's also a lot of, because there's so many now, it's easier to not notice it. I remember back when we were starting out reading, you would notice it more because everything still had to be printed as a book. And so if it didn't sell well, they would just stop translating it, but you could only get it at the bookstore.
Yes.
So you'd go to the bookstore and you'd see that series there. And like, if you started reading it, because you're like, oh, okay, I haven't read this one yet, I'll pick this up. And then actually enjoyed it, but nobody else did. You get to the end, it's like, okay, still waiting on the next one. I'm sure there are still some that they start translating and then decide not to, but it's more common for them to finish it, yeah.
And the one last thing we want to talk about, it's a few more terms that get thrown out. As we were talking about earlier, you got the manga is a comic. So they are typically created by a single author or a writer-author duo. Sometimes they may have multiple writer-artists. Like, for example, Clamp is a famous group that is a combination of, I think it's all women.
Yes.
And they all work together to create either a single story at once, or they have multiple stories going on at the same time. They created X, Cardcaptor Sakura, Tsubasa
and Holic, which were two series set in the same universe with parallel characters that were running at the same time, but were two completely different series.
That was a crazy time. But one thing we wanted to mention is that you have the manga, and then you also have the mangaka. That is the artist. So if you ever have someone talking about the mangaka, they are specifically talking about the creator of the series. And then, as I was saying, you have either a single artist, writer-artist duo, a combination of multiple artists, but then each of these, just because of the timing and how complex they are, they will also have multiple assistants. So you'll have the main artist and then multiple assistants who help them do backgrounds, characters, inking, design, things like that. So you'll have the main artist, multiple assistants who help them finish their work on time, especially if you're doing a weekly, that they have some number of days to get the story done, all the art done, clean it up, and get it ready to go in 4 days at most, probably less, depending on what the story is. And then each of these then have an editor who oversees the work for the publishing company, and then goes to the publisher, gets printed, because everything has to be ready to go right on time. And it's so complicated.
Yeah. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of people who are involved in it.
So if you ever have a chance, there's a story that covers this really well. It's called Bakuman. It's about the manga publishing industry. It gives you kind of a sneak peek or behind the curtain look at how all this works. If you actually read some of the forwards or after in a book, they will sometimes talk about things that are going on with how the book is publishing, things like that. And they will also list all the assistants. And then sometimes you will see assistants from one mangaka either jump to other mangaka as to be their assistant, or they will also then create their own stories themselves and become a new published author. That happens a lot. Because they're getting experience, they're learning how to do storytelling and speed up how they create the stories, because I can't imagine how much work goes into it. And you can see, if you go online, you can see some of the schedules that some of these people have, and it's ridiculous.
It's a very intense workload. This is not an easy thing that all these artists are doing.
Yeah.
They are doing a ton of work
But that was the general beginner's guide to all this. It's really cool to dive deep into it. If you want to, there's tons of information online, but this should give everyone a good head start of what things to look for, what words get thrown out there that you may not quite understand. And hopefully this helped out at least someone.
So for our main topic today, we're going to be doing a review of Goodbye Eri by Tatsuki Fujimoto. If you are thinking that name sounds familiar, but this is not the story you know him from, this is the author of Chainsaw Man, a pretty famous Shonen Jump series, but we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about Goodbye Eri. Before we get into that, two things. The first is, after this part, we are going to be spoiling the entirety of the series because it's a single book. We're going to talk about the whole thing, so if you want to read it without knowing any spoilers at all, this is your last warning. We're going to talk about everything, or at least we will allow ourselves to talk about everything. And the second thing is...
So before we do that, so people who do skip this,
yes.
Do you like this?
That was the second thing of what our thoughts are on it is, do we like this without any spoilers? What would we say? I am glad I read it. I'm unsure how much I like it, but I'm glad I read it.
Yeah.
And considering how much I have not liked Chainsaw Man, this makes me like Fujimoto's work a lot more. But it's not a series I would recommend without any reservations.
Fair enough.
What about you? What do you think of this?
I like it. I think if you liked Fujimoto, you're probably going to like this. It has his style of storytelling. One thing is that, without going into spoilers, this is, as we were saying, this is a single story, so a single book. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to read a single book, this isn't for you. This is a one and done story, but it is, I believe, written between the first act of Chainsaw Man and the second, so he took a break to do this, and it's good. I like it. It's a odd story.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's not going to resonate with everybody just because of the kind of stories he likes to tell. Mm-hmm. But it's a very interesting story.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it. And I think, again, as a person who's tried to get into Chainsaw Man and really hasn't, if Chainsaw Man didn't appeal to you because of the violence and such, it's not that there's no dark parts of the story. There's some pretty dark things, but there's not that graphic, horrific violence. Mm-hmm. So if you're like, oh, this is kind of neat, but this is just way too intense and bloody for me, this is not that, so maybe that will help you. This is more of a personal drama.
Yes.
With that, this is your last spoiler warning. From here on out, we're not holding anything back, so this is your last chance to turn it off if you don't want it spoiled.
3, 2, 1. Spoiler
it turns
time.
out it actually was his father all... Oh, wait, no, that's Star Wars. Never mind.
So, what is this story?
Eri is made out of people. Wait, no, that's Soylent Green. Never mind.
Yeah, different story.
So, we're just going to summarize it, because I think if you haven't read this, just knowing what happens in the story still won't explain a lot.
No.
Because it is very confusing. But Goodbye Eri, it's the story of Yuta, who starts off as middle school at the very beginning. I think he's a high schooler by the time the story actually takes place, but the recordings that he makes that's going to be part of this first act gets in middle school. His mother is dying, and she asks him to make a movie about her by recording some of her last moments as she's alive.
Yes. There's a lot of cinematography discussion in this story.
There's a lot about that.
That's the big focus.
So he begins, and you get a bunch of scenes of him bits of recordings of his mother as she's dying of this terminal illness. But at the moment when she's about to actually die, Yuta turns around and runs away from the hospital. And then it switches, and you see him running from the hospital, and the hospital explodes in a giant fireball. And it turns out that what you were reading up until now was the edited version of his clips of doing that, and he decided to end the movie by having the hospital explode. And this was a screening at his high school.
Yes.
And a lot of people, most of the students and Yuta's father, find it to be horrible and very...
bad taste.
Yeah. His mother was dying and all this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yuta is going through a lot. Obviously, his mother just dying, and now everyone at school hating him. He goes to commit suicide by jumping from a hospital roof, and there meets Eri, another high school student from his school, who said that his film was actually really great. It was pushing boundaries, it was trying to be something unique, and it didn't shy away from really dark things. Mm-hmm. And also, if he is going to commit suicide, he should go to this other hospital down the street to ruin their reputation, because this is actually a nice hospital.
Yeah.
Small point, but it's like, Eri's, the first thing Eri says is like, if you're going to jump off and kill yourself, don't do it at this hospital. That hospital down there, they suck. Go do it there.
Yeah.
Which should... Eri's very interesting.
Yes.
But this goes into sort of what's going to be the main plot of the story. Eri and Yuta end up going and watching a lot of movies together, and ultimately Eri asks Yuta to make another movie, and ultimately what it turns out to be about is a movie about Eri, who is going through the same sort of thing. She's dying of a terminal illness, and Eri asks Yuta to do the same sort of thing. But there's a lot more of Eri and Yuta talking about what makes a good film, how to do characters, how to do the plot, how to do things. We learn a lot about how Yuta likes to do things where he wants that bit of fantasy in his story. That's why the hospital exploded. It was too real, it was too normal, and it's like, oh, the hospital exploded, blah. A little bit of the fantastic mixed in. Mm-hmm. And so in this movie, Eri's gonna be this vampire who's can live for an extremely long time, but her youthful life is finally cut up to her, and so she's going to die. And there's a number of scenes all throughout this. You see one where Yuta, Eri, and his father are all eating dinner together, and Yuta's father says to Yuta that he shouldn't be making this. This is a terrible thing. Don't do this. And then 2 panels later, he's asking, okay, how was that performance? Because this was all a fake scene that they were put in the movie. Mm-hmm. And he's actually kind of really excited for Yuta to be doing this and trying to make another movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the dad seems really supportive of the stuff that he does.
Yeah.
He wasn't a huge fan of the original movie, but he's trying to help his son, because one thing that kind of comes across in the beginning, that he's still very upset about his mom passing away. And Eri is trying to cheer him up, sort of, in her own way.
Mm-hmm. And you see their relationship also developing. Mm-hmm. It comes up a few times, and they sort of talk about it first as part of the plot for the movie, but then it starts to become more than that, of Yuta and Eri being sort of like boyfriend and girlfriend. Their relationship physically doesn't develop that far, at least from what you see. Although there's hints that maybe there's a little bit off camera with that. But they are very close, and they're always watching movies together. They're always talking about this. They're always recording things for it. Mm-hmm. But as this is going on, you start learning other things. Yuta's father talks to Yuta about how what Yuta's mother did this for is she was not great. She was very emotionally abusive, both to Yuta and his father, even though he loved her. But she wanted Yuta to do this to make a great story if she survived, or to make a memorial for her if she died, and was forcing Yuta to make this movie for her own ends.
Yeah, because in the beginning, you see all these happy memories of, okay, the mom is dying, but she seems like a nice person. But then later, it's revealed the behind the scenes that she's telling, oh, you're filming this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you got to do it this way. She's critiquing him harshly.
Yeah, I don't even like the word critique for that. She's just berating him of like, this is wrong, this isn't good, like that's not good enough, do better. Mm-hmm. Eri does a lot of, okay, these are how movies work and this is what you should do. Like, instead of just saying you're doing it wrong, like, this is a cool way to do it, what if you did it this way? Like, there's a dialogue to it and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ultimately, Eri, just before she dies, Yuta finishes the film, so she does get to see it, but then she dies. It's presented at the school again, and is a lot better received than the first one was. And one of Eri's friends ends up confronting Yuta about it, and says, like, that wasn't really what Eri was like, but they also kind of agree that it's kind of a good memorial, even if it wasn't really who Eri was.
Yep.
And that seems to be the end. And so that's like 90% of the book. And from here on, this is like the last 10%. And this is where it gets real weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where it feels like it was supposed to end. Where it's like, okay, and that's the end. It's like, but it's not over yet. So then time skip, kind of. You get to see Yuta now looking a lot older. Talks about how after that moment, he would keep working on Eri's movie, recutting it, rearranging the scenes, continuing to work on it, even though Eri had already passed.
Yeah, because they talk about they filmed so much. They filmed everything constantly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this story does is there's a lot of first person through the camera scenes. And it's like they just filmed tons and tons and tons. And as you're saying, he just kept recutting. I know I can make this better.
Yeah. But also, this now being years later, he falls in love, gets married, he ends up having kids. And then he's in a car crash. His wife, his kids, and his father are all killed.
Yeah.
And he's recording this to explain what he's been doing and how he's now going to go back. I believe he says I don't know if he just decides to go back to where he and Eri used to watch films on a whim. He's about to go kill himself. But he ends up going back to where he and Eri were watching movies. And Eri is there, alive, watching movies. And it turns out Eri is a vampire. Who every 200 years dies because the brain can only hold so much information. So she dies and is reborn. And she left herself a letter explaining things, and also Yuta's movie to help her understand who she was. And Yuta and she have a conversation about this, and then they say thank you, but like goodbye. And as Yuta is leaving, he says he finally understands why he recut the film so many times, as it was missing that pinch of fantasy. And then the building that they were in explodes as he walks away. And that's the end. So there's your story. Like, I don't know if like just saying what the narrative is always the right thing, but I think you have to start with that with this, because there's a lot I want to say about this, but that's what happens. And now we can sort of take apart some of the pieces of it.
Yeah. It's a wild story.
Do you have anything to the narrative that you want to add that I might have glossed over or skipped?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of, like we already mentioned with the mom, how in the beginning you think she's a nice person, she's dying and suffering and things like that. But then there's the reveal later. Oh, but that was just what we cut for the camera. Yeah. There's more going on. There's lots of camera tricks, in quotes, that they try to get across in the narrative. It's like, okay, we're recording this, but we're going to cut out the not nice parts. We're just going to show the good stuff. And that comes along, as you said, with the other students and how they feel about the Eri movie. It's like, okay, but that's not quite her, but maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. And so there's a lot more of like what actually happens. There's a lot of scenes of Eri and Yuta talking and just like being together and talking about movies and talking about all these things. And there's a bunch of scenes with him and his father and with the girl at the end and these different things that we're just not talking, because it's like you had to compress that story down so much. Like it is 220 pages. It's like 200 something pages. It's a full comic book. It's not short. And it's not this compressed when you're reading it. Oh, it's 201 pages, according to my copy. Yeah. It's not this tightly packed and poorly explained in it. Characters have scenes and talk, but that's what happens.
Yeah. This is a much more, I don't know the correct word for it, but it's not a action story. It's a very much a almost surreal story, just with all the camera cinematography that's put in and things like that. It's hard to explain the kind of story it is just because it's odd. Yeah. In a good way, but it's odd.
It's a drama. It is a drama story, and it focuses a lot on narrative and how narratives are presented, things like that. And I think the first thing I want to say, because it's just the easiest thing to talk about, the art is fantastic.
Yes.
Fujimoto's really good, and his art style lends itself well to that slightly more realistic but still manga looking vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Dad and Yuta and such, like, they don't have that traditional like movie of like Hollywood pretty where like the ordinary kid still looks like a supermodel. Eri looks very pretty, but Eri's also sort of supposed to be this weirdly beautiful person.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else looks much more normal.
Yes.
And the layout of the book is amazing in that everything is recorded on a smartphone. Every page is either full pages, half pages with like a horizontal line, or these quarter slice panels that are all exactly the same, so that it, as you're reading it from top to bottom, page to page, it's as if you're watching it on a smartphone, which is how all these movies where Yuta was given a smartphone for his birthday to record all this, and this is what he's recording all of his films on, is a smartphone. So the book itself is trying to make it seem like you're watching it on a smartphone, and it does not deviate from that whatsoever.
Nope.
There's no traditional odd panel things cross page. There's a couple 2-page spreads. There's a couple full-page spreads. But everything else is just that, okay, it's just a bigger version of that same panel view. There's no reading around the page. Just top to bottom, page by page. And you can't read it and not feel like you're watching it as a film.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very, very obviously intentional thing that works really well. And there's tons of cinematic techniques and light and shadow and framing of things that's in the art that makes sense with the narrative. That's also part of the symbolism and the themes. So art-wise, just 10 out of 10. It's crazy. It's so good.
And one of the things that, as you were saying, that it feels like it's shot on a smartphone is, you've probably done this before, is like as you're recording something and you move, you get that blurring effect. If something moves too fast, that is captured in the artwork.
It's crazy.
Someone's moving through frames, it's someone's doing something, or the camera is shaking. It is done so well. It really does feel like you're just watching a movie through this book. It's crazy. The art captures this incredibly well.
Yeah. Art, I think, it's not the best technical art I've ever seen. Like, in terms of how good are you at representing a scene, but every part of the art is in service of this story. And it's this very strict design that's very intentional that just improves everything. And yeah, that motion blur effect is, I just remember that and look at it again, and it's like every couple of pages there's like this weird motion blur on it. It's like, that's so crazy that he drew that. It's just, but then we come to the narrative. As a plot, I think it is weird, as you said, and I agree with that a lot. But I think the actual plot of like the moment to moment, the way the characters talk, the way they interact, it's weird and confusing, but it never snaps you out and be like, oh, I'm reading a comic book. All the characters, the way they talk, the way they move, the things that they do feel very natural. It's just what's happening is weird, and it's coming at you from different directions that you're not expecting.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of the story. It's to be weird. You're trying to have someone film a story of people dying. This person, Yuta, isn't a professional filmmaker. They're just doing this to either help their mom or to help their friend. They're really into movies, but I don't think he's made many by the end of the story.
If I recall correctly, these are the only 2 movies that he makes.
Yeah.
I don't think he becomes after high school, I don't think he becomes a cinematographer or a director or anything like that. He just keeps working on this movie, and he doesn't really say what he does after that. These are, if nothing else, his first 2 movies. Yeah.
So there's a not a crudeness, but a
amateurish.
Yeah, amateurish style to how the movies are filmed, which comes through in the story. It's like, okay, why did you decide to film it like that? Or why did you edit it this way? And that's where people didn't like the first one, but people liked the second one. And that comes through in the story. It's like Eri's whole point of him watching all those movies was to teach him how to make a good movie.
Yeah.
Because she wants her movie to be better than the one he did before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just scenes of we're watching this movie. Why was it good? Why was it bad? We'll watch this movie and this movie and this movie. It's like, I didn't like this movie. I like this movie. And that, I think, comes across really well through the story. It's a strange story, but I think it does what it was trying to do well, because it's trying to make a story that is odd.
Yeah. And I think that comes a lot from the themes that it's trying to talk about, not just talking about movies, which is a big part of it. They're constantly talking about, this is a story about people talking about what makes a good story. This is a story about people trying to tell a story in a way that's compelling and will make people react to it. And you're also seeing the characters do things and act and make things up or remember things that they cut out that undercut or change the narrative. Like, oh, the whole scene with his dad where he's like, no, I'm not going to let you make this movie. Say, how was that acting? Or it's like, he does his job where he's like trying to be angry and he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't want to have to say this, but I don't want you making this movie. That I don't think this is right. You shouldn't be doing this. And then immediately turns it around. It's like, hey, did I do a good job? It's like,
yeah.
And then the whole beginning scenes where you're watching it with his mom, and you see all these scenes of how she acts in this thing, and you feel like, oh, this is what she is. And then it turns out you see all of the pre-scene and post-scenes of that, and like, no, that wasn't how it really was. And same thing happens with Eri, intentionally and unintentionally. These themes of what is the real story and what is actually happening, what's real in a movie, what is acting, what is a narrative, and what we show in a movie represent a person.
Yeah.
And when you think about it like that, I think the story does really well.
Yeah.
And so I do like those themes. I think they're really good. I'm very happy with them.
But
do you have anything to add before the very obvious counterpoint I'm about to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
What is it?
The ending. So I've said this a couple of times. I will probably bring it up again. I was a lit major, and this ending I am not sure about, but I think I've found a way to like it. But depending on what the ending was intending, I might hate this story. But I've decided that's not what I think it's about, even though I might be wrong. But what I originally thought, and I still think has a good chance of being real, is this might be meant, the ending and the explosion, and it turns out, oh, she was actually a vampire all along. If it was meant to be, hey, you need to reread this and dig through and find the places where what's actually going on is true and what's not, and question things and try to come to an answer of like what this and that. This feels like literary try-hard bullshit, and I hate it. If I get to the end of this and it was supposed to be not like an actual mystery, there's not something to solve, but like, hey, are you going to sit down and like actually try to understand what's going on? Are you going to pick it apart and go through like scenes and try to figure out what it is? And I mean, if you read that and you want to go back and do that, that's great. But to me, if that was what the ending wanted me to feel about this story, I think it's trash. Because like it was emotionally hard enough to get through it the first time. And I'm not a person who enjoys awkwardness in stories. Like, if it's awkwardness to be hilarious, I'm okay with that. But when it's awkwardness of people trying to get through life, and there's a lot of awkward moments of watching Yuta's mom berate Yuta, all the kids in school like talking shit about Yuta to the point that he tries to kill himself, like that's heavy for me specifically, and it's heavy for anybody. And you're gonna tell me, oh no, you gotta go back and look through, like, no, fuck this, I'm not touching it again. However, what I've decided to tell myself is what I think this actually is. The end of the story, it's like, well, I wanted it to be a piece of fantasy, and then the building explodes. Because before I get to that, I don't hate like these overwrought metaphorical endings, but this just doesn't feel like it had the it just feels too much of like, well, we're going to do all that crazy metaphorical ending in one page. So the ending, the way to see the ending that I think works, that makes me still like this story is if this ending was, we've just gone through, because the last page is a 2-page spread, we've gone through 199 pages of crazy, surreal, weird, possibly falsified, possibly half-truths, etc., etc. And the last 2 pages is basically, fuck it. None of it means anything. We're just fucking with you all. Like, this, like, nothing matters at all. What's true? I don't fucking know. If it's that kind of an ending of, yeah, you want to dig into it, you can, but you're not getting an answer. What actually happened in this story at the end of it, I can kind of get behind it more, because that pushes those themes of what you see on camera isn't exactly what's happened. All it's really doing at the end is just saying, yeah, all that could be, or maybe it's bullshit. I'm not telling you. Fuck it, let's blow the building up and walk away because we're cool dudes who don't look at explosions. Wait, so was Eri a vampire? It's like, I don't know. Was, like, the movie, I don't know. Is usually going to be, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't matter, because you can't know. You can't understand that. It's just what I, Fujimoto, have shown you. And I've shown you this. And does that have anything to do with what really happened in the story? You don't know, and you can't know.
Yeah.
And that feels like a total cop-out, and also like the most reasonable way to end this story. Did you feel something? Great. Were they real? Was any of this did any of this happen? Is any part of this in any way an actual thing? I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not the whole thing. And that's all you get.
Yeah, I could see that.
What about you?
So when I first read this, when it first came out, I was like, oh, okay, I read it more just straight through. It's like, okay, crazy story. Oh, she's a vampire and it's actually real and he's freaking out. And, oh, okay. And I'm just going to end the story on just crazy explosion, because that's how the author is in this whole weird thing. But thinking back and reading it again and trying to understand what's going on, I do wonder if the idea was that this whole thing was a setup, that this whole book was just one giant movie, and as he said, he's been editing and cutting, and they filmed so much over the years that by the time they get to the end and he's older, it's like, okay, I'm gonna finish this movie. I have all of these edits of when she was younger, and I'm gonna put myself in the movie now and say, okay, she said these things, I can just cut myself in to say them as well, to pretend we're responding to each other. Because if you notice, there's no scene where they're actually next to each other. And he's like, this is how I'm going to end the movie. You are actually a vampire. We were just making it up. And she's been deceased years ago. But you have no idea, because you can't see behind the curtain. There's no way to prove it one way or the other.
God damn it.
I am just messing with you.
God damn it.
So you have no idea if any of the things he said throughout this whole story is true or not.
Go ahead.
Because everything is shot in a way that it's behind the camera. It's crazy. It's one of those, there's so many ways to look at it, and it's up to the reader to interpret what this story is. Is there a greater meaning behind it? Or is this just someone creating a story and say, I'm just going to just do whatever I feel like. And at the end, explosions are cool. Off we go. Story over. Or it's like, oh, he destroyed the vampire at the end. Haha, I win.
It's God damn it. God damn it. You've actually made me feel like now I have to go back and look through. Because it's like, oh, can we like find of like the incredibly stupid thing of like, oh, can I find her saying all of these lines in other scenes in other places and then like copy it over and be like, oh, no, she said all of this.
Oh, no, I don't know if you'll find the exacts.
I know. I don't think I will either.
Because there's so much you don't see because they're filming it. Who knows? She could have never existed. This is just a made up person. And yeah. For a while, that's what you think she is. She's just... how does she live in this abandoned building and watch movies all day and nobody cares? But somehow everyone at school knows her. Okay, this is weird. It's a weird story. It makes you think, and it ends on explosions every time.
Yeah. There's that we have 2 completely different takes already. 3 if you count the one that I hate, and I'm sure you could do more. This is, if you have listened to this and somehow haven't read it, you now know if you're going to enjoy it. Yes. And that there's something here to grapple with. And I think, to me, the thing that makes me dislike it the most is it feels like a literary cop-out. Even my, like, double cop-out where it's complete bullshit is still kind of feels like you did an ending that was just an ending because you could do this, and this is like low-hanging fruit. This wasn't you didn't actually try to get anywhere with it, but at the same time it's still well executed, and all the work leading up to that makes that kind of ending, which is not the most original thing out there, although it is pretty crazy. There's plenty of other action movies that have done weird circular logic stories and things like that with this, but I don't necessarily like this. I'm not I don't enjoy it. I don't think I'm ever going to read this again for fun. But it makes me think. And this is not like, oh, because it's a dark story, oh, it's just sad. I was like, bitch, please. My favorite story of all time ends with everyone on the planet dying. And that's not the sad part. Like, I love me some dark, horrible shit. But this does make you think. And the moment you try to grasp anything, that it just slips away just enough that you feel like, oh, I almost had it. No, let me try and grab. No, I almost got it. No, I think I got it. Well, no, but there's that. But okay, so maybe I don't. But if I go at it this way, you always feel like you almost know what that's going on, and you can almost wrap your hands around it, but it just never quite stays put. Is something kind of special about it.
Yes, this is a book that will make you think about how the story is going, and if what you've read already is what you really think it is. It's not a heavy story per se. It deals with some heavy themes of people passing away and how they're remembered and things like that. But it's a story that you want to understand, but it's hard to wrap your head around what you know and what you don't know. And it's interesting, and I like it. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's a cool story.
Yeah,
it's really, really well done, and I can't think of any other story that's similar in a manga.
What you just said, I think, is probably the best way to sum it up and to go with it. It's not a story about happy things, but it's not a dark story, because even though those things happen, the story's not really about watching your mom die and how you remember her versus how they were. Those are part of the story, but when you get to the end, you realize that wasn't what the story was about. The story was about trying to force you to grapple with how much can you actually understand of this story and these themes. There are other stories that cover these same topics and are about those topics, but this is a story that has those topics in the story, but it's not about those. It's about the narrative and how that presentation can mess with you. Like how a movie can not show things and make you feel a certain way, even though that's not really what happened. Now that I've said all of that, I feel like your answer was better, so I'm probably going to cut this whole section out. But final thought, which is going to probably be a rehash of the first thing. Should you read it?
My answer is yes. If any of this sounded interesting, definitely yes, check it out.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Even though there's parts that I don't like, I was going to reread it, and I got to a couple of things and I'm like, I don't really want to sit and reread this right now. I'd rather read something else, because I already know what's going to happen. But if you can get a hold of it, you should read it. It is worth your time at least once.
It's not a happy story per se. It's a very interesting story, and a very, without a better word, thinky story. A very cerebral. You're trying to understand what's going on, and that's what makes the story interesting.
Yeah.
but it's, as you say, it's not something I'm going to read over and over again constantly because it's not a happy story.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story, but I wouldn't say it's a happy story.
Again, I'm not saying you need to read happy stories over and over again, or that I like to do that. Again, my favorite story of all time is Saishu Heiki Kanojo, the ultimate weapon girlfriend. Everyone dies. Everyone. If you read to the end. If you only read to book 5, you get your fake happy ending. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to another episode of the Mudai Manga Book Club podcast. If you'd like to follow us outside of the show, you can find us on Blue Sky at Mudai Manga Book Club, on YouTube at Mudai Manga Book Club, and you can email us at mudaimangabookclub@gmail.com. If you enjoy the episode, please consider sharing it with friends. We'd always love to have other people listening to it. We have a modestly small viewer count.
It's growing slowly.
Yes, very slowly. 1 or 2 a year, which is technically true because that's how much it's been growing by, and we're still in our first year.
Exactly. Yep. That's how you can look at it.
We could frame that better.
Yes.
And we could frame it worse.
Yes.
So it's right in the middle. If you're listening on YouTube, we would love it if you leave a like, comment, subscribe. Just let us know anything you enjoy, anything you want to see more of, any questions you have. If you are listening on the podcast and you want to leave a review, we'd much appreciate it. Or if you want to reach out to us by email, send us any of your questions, concerns, comments, rants, why you think Goodbye Eri would be better if it was set in Vietnam War movie or something. I don't know. Whatever you want to say. But with that, we've reached our final part of the show. And so for today, Louie, what is your final recommendation?
So I'll keep this quick. I recently watched Moana 2 on Disney+. It's now out there. It's good. If you like the first one, you'll probably like the second one. It's a bit different. I believe the musical composer has changed.
It has.
But there's still a ton of music in it. That's really good. The story is... think of it as a part 2 of a trilogy. That's what it feels like. So it's setting up a lot for the next part of the series, if there is another one. Mm-hmm. But it has a self-contained story, but it does feel like there's going to be more. So it's interesting. It's good, but it has that part 2 feel. So if you're not like super into part 2 movies, like Back to the Future Part 2, where it feels like there's more to come or things like that, this may not be the movie for you. But if you're just looking for a fun movie, definitely check out Moana 2.
Okay.
How about you?
So I'm going to recommend another game. I know I've been doing that a lot recently, but this is another one that I've picked up a couple of months ago, and I've been playing it on and off. It's called UFO 50. To explain it, I got to back up a second. If you've ever heard of Spelunky, or Spelunky 2, the very popular roguelike about not Indiana Jones, the lead designer of Spelunky and a number of other indie game developers got together to make this game called UFO 50, where they made up a fake retro game console from the era of starting in like the Atari era and going into the mid NES era, and they created 50 games for this. And that is what UFO 50 is it is a retro game console as a game by UFO Soft, and they have these 50 games, and they sort of track a lot of the retro game mechanics, but they've been redone in a more modern, not style, but more modern development standards. So some of the really egregious, painful things about playing retro games have sort of been massaged out while still keeping that feel of very classic NES era games. And so they cover all sorts of things. There's a couple full-scale RPGs, there's action games, there's sports games, there's puzzles, there's weird exploration adventures, and all of the things is controlled with a D-pad and 2 buttons with a start button to allow you to bring up the system menu.
Oh, nice.
They also have games that include things like there's an idle game built into it. There's a bunch of secrets. There's tons of things to find. The whole setup is really neat, where you have these 50 games, and every time you play it for the first time, you blow the dust off of it and then put it in. And then the game loads up, and it has each game has its own title screen and options and things to play with. And they're all completely different. Some of them you could play around in like 2 or 3 minutes and get to the end of the game. Some of them, like I said, are full NES era RPGs and you could be playing for 10, 12, 20 hours.
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
It's 50 games, so you're bound to find something you like. Some of them I'll play and it's like, oh, this is kind of like, yeah, not so great. And then I'll play it again later. I'm like, oh, actually, this is fun. I remember playing something like this. It also does a lot of 2-player for not online. It's basically running like a retro console. But if you're with someone else and you want to play, you can play a lot of these games 2-player locally. If you played a lot of NES games or you played a lot of retro games, imagine someone just made 50 more and just said, here you go.
Okay.
It's available on Steam. It's available a lot of other places. They recapture a lot of retro aesthetics while still making something really new. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
And with that, that's going to be the end of the episode. Tune in next week where we are going to be covering Shangri-La Frontier, chapters 1 through 16, which is the beginning of it, as well as the Rabbituza arc.
So it's book 1, 2, and the very first chapter of the 3rd volume.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing next week. With that, have a good night, everyone.
Goodbye.
Peace. No, that's too long. Peace.
Double digits.
Double digits.
Double digits. Episode 10.
A light novel, a book with written words, as opposed to other books.
Yep, very different.
Which have drawn words.
Untitled Comic Book Club Podcast.
Yes.
So if you think manga...
I don't know if you know this, but the English term for book is book.
Ah, yes. We've translated it from English to English. Yeah.
You're welcome, Internet.
Thank you for that. Doraemon. Things like that, where they're
Doraemon?
kind of...
Doraemon.
Doraemon. That's what...
Yes.
I'll let you
Not
pronounce
Doraemon.
these.
It is door person.